What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by WinBet. This is the Week 2 college football betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and with me, as always, is Colin Wilson, gearing up for a major showdown in Fayetteville between Arkansas and Texas. How you feeling on this fine Thursday evening? Nervous? Excited?
Well,
what do you got?
Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus, where we're going to spend the next 3 hours covering Hogs and Horns, the old Southwestern Conference rivalry, dating back to 1915. Richard Nixon going to the game of the century in 1969. Arkansas going down in 2003 with Matt Jones and Cedric Cobbs to blow Texas out of the water in their own house. Down Horns. This rivalry has been going on way before I was born. Way before my 88-year-old grandmother was born. This is a huge week in my neck of the woods.
I had $4 million on you saying Southwest Conference in the first 30 seconds. I'll be bringing up that game. Any thoughts on that game right off the bat?
Yeah, I think there's some things going on with the team that might explain some of the, I guess we'll call it rustiness. Sam Pittman wants to call it rustiness. We'll call it rustiness. I think there are some explanations as to why there were 13 penalties, why the game was, so terrible from an execution standpoint with the Razorbacks, and we'll see if they can resolve that this week.
Are you going to have a play on the game?
Yeah, I took an under 57. Sark is not a fast tempo. Pittman and Barry Odom, they know exactly what it is that Sark wants to do. Pittman said it in his presser on Monday. He said, I know that Sark wants to go heavy 12 formation on one side of the field, and they're going to dump the ball off to John Robinson on the other side of the field. We will have a spy on Robinson the entire game. Now, whether that's Grant Morgan or Bumper Poole after he comes back from a targeting aspect or Catalan, we'll figure it out. Somebody's going to have a spy on Robinson. And then if you look at the other side, we have execution issues. KJ Jefferson saved our skin. Traylon Smith has no explosiveness. Don't know where that went. 2.5 yards after contact. And then there's the curious case of Treylon Burks. Now, this is a guy that was All-American list all over the place, was proclaimed to be hurt through a little bit of training camp. Injury was never specified. And he came out and posted some terrible numbers against Rice. 1 rush for -2 yards. He had 9 targets, only caught 5 balls, not a lot of yards, 2 drops, with very uncharacteristic. And then the one thing that we're not used to with Treylon Burks is he created 3 missed tackles. And that number should have been way higher. And so when you go into some of the reading between the lines and the coach speak, Sam Pittman called Treylon Burks' play rusty. He practiced Wednesday, he practiced Thursday, then he was just rusty, which makes no sense to me whatsoever for a guy that's been on the practice field every single day. And I think when you take a step back, you have to realize that my neck of the woods, the state of Arkansas, it's still really small. We all know each other's families. We all know what color you shit. You shit purple, we know it. And we're very aware of the fact that Treylon Burks has signed multiple NIL deals, that he has had a lot of focus taken away from him off the field through August, and that kind of seeped into the game against Rice. There are certain NIL deals that he had that are now being put on hold, his responsibilities to those. And that's not to say he's the only player, right? I mean, Bo Nix has the sweet tea. The chicken places are going to get a hold of everybody. Every chicken sandwich is going to have representation in the SEC. But Treylon Burks might have taken on more than he can chew from an NIL perspective, and that took his focus off the field. So when Sam Pittman says rusty, what that means is he did not have focus for the Rice game. And can you build that just a couple days before Texas? I would say no, because if you read between more of Sam Pittman, 200-pound freshman back A.J. Green is getting a bunch of reps out of the backfield in practice. I don't think Treylon Burks is going to be ready for this game. If he does, it surprises me, we win, great. I like under 57 in this game. Sark is not particularly fast. Arkansas knows exactly what he wants to do. Odom has faced Sark the last few years, and Odom runs a 3-3-5 and goes into max protect against the explosive play. So to me, this is an Arkansas offense that is not executing. Arkansas defense knows exactly what they want to do against Texas. It's an underplay all the way for me. I guess the buy point for Arkansas is 7.5, but you need your eyes on Burks. If Burks can perform at the way Jefferson is, it's a play on Arkansas live immediately. If not, I mean, and remember this too. I said this on the podcast last week. Sam Pittman is pissed with this team because they get off to slow starts. They can't score on their opening drive. So as much as I have sat here and watched a 3.5 turn into 4.5, turn into 5, turn into 6, turn into 7, as the market hammers this number, I realize in the back of my head that unless you're betting more than $1,000 on the live line, you can absolutely go in and get Arkansas after the first series when they don't score again. Now, I'm sure that I said that they will score again, or I'm sure they will score in the first drive.
Book Arkansas up 7-0, and book Colin betting Arkansas plus 7.5. You'll see that come through on the app. Saturday morning on the Action Network app. All right, Colin is looking ahead to. So we have a lot to get to today. Obviously, we'll talk some FCS. We'll talk the marquee matchups of the weekend. It's not the greatest weekend in college football after last weekend. Week 2, there's kind of a lull. But we bet, so who cares? We just try to find winners. And whenever you think it's going to be a boring weekend, that means, Mercer's going to beat Alabama. We'll talk Tin Horn later. Then we'll get to, some Friday Night Lights, our favorite bets of the weekend, favorite underdog. We got a lot to get to. Let's just hop right into it with our first segment, Look Ahead or Look Away. So we always like to start by not looking at this week, but next week and seeing which teams are potentially going to get caught looking ahead, whether it's from preparation or mentally, and maybe it leads to them, taking the foot off the gas or pulling their starters a little sooner. We've seen that already happen quite a few times this season. Three games stick out this weekend. Let's start with the aforementioned Alabama. So Alabama travels to Gainesville next weekend. Well, first, Florida has to visit South Florida. It's the first time that these two teams will ever meet in South Florida. They met, I think, in like 2010 or 11 in Gainesville. But South Florida is a 28.5-point home dog. They were embarrassed in their opener against NC State. They lost 45-0. They gave up 300 yards rushing, which is not a good sign when you're about to play Florida, who ran for 400 yards against Florida Atlantic. And it looks like Dan Mullen has completely changed his offense to being, after losing all the weapons in Kyle Trask, to a rush-focused offense. Emory Jones can run. This kid Richardson that came in might be a star at quarterback. He was electric. A lot of Florida fans are calling for him to be quarterback. Sadly, I had to take South Florida here. It's awful. I mean, there's not much to like about the defense. The defensive line is brutal, which is why they can't defend the run. Cade Fortin is awful at quarterback, the UNC highly touted transfer or ex-UNC transfer. But this line is too high on the surface. South Florida, this is pretty much their Super Bowl. A lot of Florida kids. They had a couple extra days to prepare, and Florida has Alabama on deck. So I'm very convinced that Florida's going to win this game. But, they might go very vanilla in the second half. They're not going to try. They're going to show as little as possible with Alabama coming to town next week. South Florida, a couple extra days of preparation. The number on the surface was just too high. If I can get over 28, throw in this situation, I have to play it. But things are bad at South Florida. I mean, I'll tell you, there's a site out there for USF, the dailystampede.com. And there was a post on there. We need to talk about USF Part 3. Actually, no, we don't. And it's a writer, Jamie DeVriend, who basically said, I'm done. I've been writing about South Florida for 11 and a half years. I'm done. I'm not, I was supposed to go to this game. Instead, I'm going in October to watch the Lightning. I was supposed to go to Dallas. I canceled my credentials. He's done. He's done with South Florida football. A lot of that is to do with they're not going to the Big 12 and they've done nothing about it. And then the program is just a disaster. But if you want to, he said it was a pretty funny article. I think it's legit too. I think he's just done and not writing anymore. He said, I was looking on Google Maps for a Salvation Army box near campus so I could ditch all my gear. But yeah, it's bad, but there's value in the number. It's going to be scary. It's a great situation. I'm riding with the Bulls, sadly. Any thoughts?
I am not riding with the Bulls. I mean, I know South Florida was blanked by NC State. They had a standard down success rate of 20% less than the national average. They allowed 7 tackles for loss and had 8.3 yards to go as an average on third down. Now, they did face NC State. That's a good team. So you say we can't take this away, but I mean, South Florida was horrible last year in this new coaching tenure. And quarterbacks Timmy McClain and Cade Fortin combined for just 14 of 33 passes and 3 interceptions. I don't know if he can get anything out of this offense. And I think what's important, we talked about redemption angles for certain coaching staffs and certain players after a terrible 2020 or, COVID pandemic and everything. And Todd Grantham is one of those coaches, one of those coordinators that needs sort of a redemption year. Florida was one of the worst teams in the nation at stopping third downs. And, Grantham has stated flat out, we are playing more press coverage. We are no longer going to play a soft zone, and we're going to execute that against South Florida. And, when I go and I look at that, I see that Florida cruised last week against FAU up 21-0 going into the fourth quarter. And, Grantham, there's still some things they need to work on for the Gators. Florida Atlantic went 5 of 12 on third downs, where the Gators struggled in recent years. And Florida Atlantic 2+ first downs on 55% of drives. That's well over the national average of 41%. So the Owls were able to move the chains, have success rate. They won some more third down plays than they should have. So, Grantham is hell-bent on shutting down a team. And sadly, that's going to be a South Florida team who can't go back to the Quentin Flowers days and keep their writers to keep writing about them. But you're right about the quarterback. I mean, this Anthony Richardson kid, I knew the reason he didn't get the start is because it was Emory Jones's turn. He's waited forever. And Anthony Richardson kid, when you said he's electric, is a freshman. But what he did on the field at 6'4", 230 pounds, he had just, 7 carries and 160 yards. What's important about that number is that only one of those was scrambles. He had 20 scramble yards and 140 on designed runs. So considering Emory Jones is half the size of what Anthony Richardson is, we could see a flip at quarterback real soon. So, this is a thing where Bama is on deck, but Mullen also has this attitude. If you can't get into any Dan Mullen interview where he's talking about dominating the state of Florida, dominating in recruiting, I'm dominating on the field. Hey, Central Florida, you want to keep running your mouth? We'll come and play at your place. You want to do that? No, you don't want to do that. He wants to own the state of Florida. So I'm not getting into the habit of fading Dan Mullen when he's taking on a Florida team, especially against a South Florida team that hasn't scored yet this season, and Grantham, who has an axe to grind because teams just keep converting third down. So, for me, this would be a Florida first half play, if anything.
Two other ones that involve MAC teams. We have Buffalo traveling to Nebraska. At WinBet, Nebraska's a 14-point favorite, total 54.5. We also have Ball State traveling to Penn State. Penn State at WinBet's a 22-point favorite. Penn State has Auburn on deck. Nebraska has Oklahoma on deck. I look at both games and I say, look, Nebraska's already lost the game. Penn State had a losing season last year. Neither of these teams can afford to be caught looking at. And maybe they go a little more vanilla in the second half, but they have both these teams have a lot to work on. I don't see any angle here. Pick one of the two and if you see anything.
Yeah, I mean, Buffalo plus 14 is the play. It's creeping up there against Nebraska. Nebraska's overlooked this huge OU game. I'm not sure if they're prepping or if they even want to make the trip down, I-29, I-35 to make that game. But the Buffalo box score against Wagner is just impossible to get a read on this new Bulls team. 7.5 yards per play versus Wagner's 1.5. It was an absolute stomp for Kevin Marks and Ron Cook, the running backs of Buffalo, keeping it in the Jared Patterson mold. They rushed 71% of the times, 71% of the time. And that's good news because Fordham got 129 yards on the ground against Nebraska also. It's same old with Nebraska, 119th in defensive havoc and 110th offensively in havoc allowed. They can't seem to take the ball away. They can't seem to have ball security when Adrian Martinez has the ball. So this is a number where myself and a number of power rating people make it 9.5. So I think when this team gets up a little bit too high, 14 is going to be the play. The Penn State one, to be real quick, to be real quick on Ball State. I mean, we know Drew Plitt and his wide receiver there, Justin Hall, they may have more career throws and receptions than I think any other combination in FBS. And this is a really good spot to catch a Penn State defense that, yes, was fantastic against Wisconsin, but they were on the field for like 44 minutes. So, what is the level of intensity and play that Penn State's going to have when you've got Overlook to Tank Bigsby next week. So, for me, this is a game where you have to look at an over. A first half over, I think, is the best play because Sean Clifford did not really have a great game. Now, Mike Yurcich, if you're looking at tempo and pace, they finished up 7th in plays per minute. Penn State is now a fast up-tempo offense, and we knew that they would be, but the execution by Clifford just isn't there yet. And we know, there's a different player in Sean Clifford between 3 scripted series and then when they kind of call it on the fly. And so I think Mike Yurcich needs a get healthy game for Sean Clifford. I think this is it. But, where is the defense going to be after last week's game and what they got next week? So, and Ball State can sling it, and they're going to sling it all 4 quarters. So I like the first half over in that game.
Yeah, the tough thing for me is with these MAC teams, I go back to last week and I played Western Michigan. I'm trying to be cautious with them early on in the season out of conference because the priors that we have last year are so out of whack because they only played other MAC teams. Right. So, and a lot of them only played like 3 or 4 games. Some of them only played 3 or 4 games against some of the worst teams in the country. So from a power ratings perspective and a priors perspective, it's difficult for me to get a grasp on where these teams are. So it's probably a pass for me, even though it is a pretty good situation. Ball State did look awful last week against Western Illinois. So you would think that you're going to get their full focus here, but they might just end up being overmatched in the trenches. That's what Michigan did to Western Michigan. They went big and they were just running at will against them. And then they couldn't do anything to stop Michigan's defensive line. However, that leads me to Toledo plus 17 at Notre Dame. Notre Dame has a game with Purdue on deck. They just finished Florida State. It's a pretty good situational spot here for Toledo for a number of reasons. You look at that Notre Dame defense last week, it was gassed in the fourth quarter and in overtime. And now they only have 5 days to prepare for this game. Meanwhile, Toledo, who played at home in a laugher over Norfolk State, had an extra day and a half of prep and rest. They rested their starters throughout that game. This is, we talk about this the year of returning experience. Toledo had more returning experience than any team in the country. Notre Dame bottom 10. And you could see some of the problems with Notre Dame last week. Notre Dame's offensive line looked really poor. Last year, they allowed a stuff rate of 14%. Against Florida State, 49%. I mean, they're Kyle Williams averaged 2.6 yards per carry. They couldn't get anything going on the ground. On the other side of the ball, their defensive line, which their defensive front 7, which lost a lot, got pushed around a little bit by Florida State. They allowed, overall, they allowed 6 yards per play, over 260 yards on the ground. Toledo can run the ball. Toledo can sling the ball. This is a team that actually has a pretty good offensive and defensive line for a MAC team. So I think that they can compete here. Notre Dame also lost its left tackle to an injury. They lost 2 more linebackers to injury during the game. Toledo brings back everybody. I mean, Carter Bradley's a new starting quarterback, but he started before Gus Bradley's son. They will probably not have Tyson Anderson, which does hurt. Their star safety, he's an NFL prospect, will play at the next level. He's been dealing with a nagging injury, and I don't think he's going to play. He wasn't on the depth chart, so that does hurt. But I think Toledo can compete here. And look, it's a bad spot for Notre Dame. They're still trying to figure out the Marcus Freeman defense. I think Toledo will be able to move the ball on the ground. I think that they'll hit a couple big plays through the air, and their defense has enough playmakers. They bring back everyone from the 2 deep. They added a Penn State transfer to bolster their defensive line in Culpepper. Johnson's a hell of a player up front, too. So they have some talent, and they can get after the quarterback. So I think that they're going to be able to make enough plays here to hang with Notre Dame. It wouldn't shock me if this game was close. The Notre Dame was 8-0 against MAC teams all time. And Brian Kelly's been great in this spot as a 14-plus point favorite. I think he's 64-2 straight up. Lost to Duke and Northwestern. He's actually the most profitable coach to bet since 2005 as a 14-plus point favorite on the money line. He rarely loses these games. But if you go back to 2018, similar situation, Notre Dame escaped with a close win against Michigan. And this game was on Saturday, and it didn't go to overtime. The next week, they played Ball State, another MAC team. They were 42-point favorites, and they won by 8. So don't be surprised if Toledo is there right there in the fourth quarter. The only thing I'm worried about, I think this line should be closer to 10, and I really like Toledo's roster. The only thing I'm worried about is just that my Mac Priors are all off. But with this situation, with Toledo's roster, with their coaching staff, I really like their defensive coordinator too. He was the head coach at Mount Union, made a lot of changes last year, moved some positions around, which I think will pay off this year after a full off season of that. So I really like their schematics defensively. So unless they just get manhandled here, I think they're going to hang. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of interesting moving pieces that people may not be aware of coming into this game, especially when you get into the box scores of Toledo from last week. And listen, the number was available at 19.5 before the Florida State game. And that was a great time to fire in on Toledo, saying that if things play out in the Florida State game the way I think they will, then this game should come in around 17 or 16.5. That's exactly what's happened. But we're not here to pat ourselves on the back. We're here to make money. And so the buying point on Toledo, I think, is to stop at 16. I agree with you. I make this game a lot lower, but 16 is going to be the last where I would probably take a ticket on Toledo. But there are other betting deliverables that you can get from this game. You can't take much from Toledo hammering Norfolk State, other than the fact I was shocked that they ran the ball in 70% of snaps. I think they had 38 rushing attempts, and they didn't play tempo whatsoever. Very un-Toledo-like. They still posted top 20 numbers on both sides of the ball and finishing drives. So that was very Toledo-like. But this DeQuan Finn and Bryant Kobach, they just posted gaudy numbers running the ball, and receiving the ball. And Finn actually had 5 passes.
Finn's their backup quarterback who's dual threat.
Yeah.
They're going to bring him in for packages really fast. And he looked really good. Carter Bradley's the more traditional passer.
Yeah.
Quarterback's son, coach's son. But yeah, Finn, I think they're going to bring him in, and he's a good change of pace, keep Notre Dame's defense on their toes. I think that they can use him effectively.
Yeah, and I agree, because if you look at what Notre Dame did in that overtime win against FSU, they had no rushing success rate on offense whatsoever. They ranked around 100th in line yards on offense. They were 90, and then we flipped to the defensive side of the ball to tack on to what Finn and Kobach are doing for Toledo. This is where things got ugly. Notre Dame got a rank of 90th in tackling. That doesn't sound like a Marcus Freeman team. They finished 99th in defensive finishing drives. That doesn't sound like a Marcus Freeman defense whatsoever. So I know it's a one-game sample. I know it was down in Tallahassee. I know these kids haven't played in front of fans in a really long time, but FSU's explosive plays and passing downs combined with terrible tackling is what almost got the Seminoles that win outright. Now, weather is going to play a factor here. Winds are blowing 17 miles per hour, angled to the northwest corner of the end zone. The Irish, they did place 12th in SP Plus special teams rankings this week. Listen, that's a limited sample set, but we
they were
know
awful
this
last year in special teams.
They were awful last year, but we know this for a fact. Jack Cohn has zero footwork. He has zero ability to escape the pocket and elude anybody. This is a heavy tempo rush rate coming out of Tommy Rees. This is going to be a heavy tempo. And if Toledo continues this heavy tempo rush rate that they have, I don't know where this came from. Like, they were all passing team. Now
they were
70%.
playing Norfolk State though, so
I know they didn't have to do anything, but if you got Kobach and Finn back there doing these kinds of things, the third down explosiveness, the passing downs explosiveness, that could get Notre Dame in trouble again. So I agree with you. I'm on Toledo. I took the under. Actually, was betting the under here as we started this. I wanted 57. It's not coming back to 57. If the Rockets are going to stay on the ground more than they pass in typical years with Candle, then this is an under team that the market just hasn't caught up to.
All right, it's time to move on to our marquee games of the weekend. We got 3 of them. We'll spend a couple minutes on each. All right, let's start with Oregon at Ohio State. This is a noon kick on Saturday. Ohio State's a 14.5-point favorite. This line was under 14, and it is breezed by 2 touchdown mark. Over under 63.5. The big news here that you probably have heard about all week is, will Thibodeau play? The star defensive end who has a sprained ankle, was in a boot last weekend, came out of the game in Oregon's win over Fresno State. Ohio State also has some injury questions. Josh Proctor left the game, but he's been practicing. I think he's going to go. Ohio State played without their top two corners last week in Seven Banks and Cam Brown. I'm almost positive Seven Banks is going to start, which will be big against Pittman, Oregon's receiver. I'm sure he'll be matched up with him a lot. When I look at this game, there was a lot of things that I did not like about Oregon last week, and I did not like Oregon coming into the season. And first of all, they couldn't run the ball at all. I'm not an Anthony Brown truther. And, without Thibodeau fully healthy or maybe not even playing, CJ Stroud might have some early jitters again, but he at least was able to settle in. I'm sure he has a lot more confidence now. I just don't think that, he's going to make plays regardless. Every game, Ohio State's going to score. It could be on screens. It could be on slants. It's just dynamic receivers and running backs. They're going to score. But they also can can dominate this game on the ground, where I think Oregon is exploitable. So I think that Ohio State's going to be able to sustain drives whenever they want. And I don't trust Oregon to do the same, even though I'm not a big Kerry Coombs guy. And I don't love this Ohio State secondary yet. But I'm assuming Proctor and Banks will play, which will help. And, but the trenches, Ohio State's going to have the advantage in this game. And look, Oregon has team speed and they have team talent, but it's just not on the same level as Ohio State. I make this line right around 2 touchdowns. It's probably gonna be a trendy dog, Oregon catching 14.5. I want no part. What are your thoughts here?
Well, you got to like the secondary better than last year's version with Sean Wade, right? The Thibodeau thing is quite interesting because Day came out in his presser earlier in the week and he said, we're going to practice as if he's playing. And I think that's important for the tackles for the two teams, Nicholas Petit-Frere and DeJuan Jones, who are now, Thayer Munford is now moved inside to guard. And these two tackles, they were responsible for half the pressures in the Minnesota game. So that offensive line has got to get a little bit better, but I don't think it matters. The Ducks defense had a great day in standard downs against Fresno, but when it came to passing downs, the drives just were extended by Jake Haener and Ronnie Rivers. The Bulldogs finished with a success rate 17% higher than the national average in passing downs. And that kind of fits what you and I said over the summer. This is Tim DeRuyter, new defensive coordinator. He likes to give up a whole bunch of yards. He doesn't want to allow an explosive play in the 3-3-5. And the issue is that works when you're good at limiting scoring attempts, which he didn't do against Fresno. Fresno got to the red zone 5 times and they scored on all 5 trips against Oregon. That's just a formula that's not going to work. So the question is can the Buckeyes get explosiveness against this Ducks defense? And the answer is 1,000%. This is the best.
If you just say I'm going to prevent Ohio State from getting explosive plays. An explosive play to Ohio State is Trevion Henderson's a stud. It's a little swing pass, is a slant, is a play design over the middle, and then the receivers are gone. Like that's just not the approach you can take with Ohio State.
That was the play that I saw. That was the play I saw last week. I said Oregon's in deep, deep shit. I don't care how fast Kayvon Thibodeau, how healthy he is. I don't care if he's 110%. If he can't get to CJ Stroud in a second and a half, there are so many weapons waiting to either throw over Thibodeau or throw it before he gets there, move the pocket, heavy set one side. But when you saw Trevion Henderson take that dump pass from CJ Stroud and then go for an explosive touchdown, or you watch Mayan Williams maybe run to the other edge, the edge that has a problem, setting contain, that's a serious, serious issue for this Oregon defense. I just think, CJ Stroud with a game under his belt, he's probably practicing getting rid of the ball in 1.5 seconds. But will it even matter? There's so many weapons on this Ohio State team. I can't see how they don't get theirs. And I will join you on the whole Anthony Brown. He had one really explosive play, and it was on a 4th and short when he needed it, and he cut a corner and got the touchdown to beat Fresno State. You take that out of there, and it was not a great day. Fresno had
if you take that run, that was a 30-yard run. You take that out of there. You take that 30 run out as well.
Yeah.
Before that, and that won the game. That was the game-winning touchdown at the end. They had 45 carries for 150 yards. If you remove that up until that point in the final minutes, that's against Fresno.
Right.
It's not very Oregon-like.
Yeah, I mean, Fresno had 8 tackles for loss, and the Ducks went just 4.5 yards on passing downs. So ask yourself this question: what is the kind of offense that beats Ohio State? Teams that go long verticals, fly routes, slant routes, deep in the passing game. It's not what Anthony Brown is doing. He doesn't have the arm strength to pull that off. I don't think these 3rd and 4th down conversions are gonna happen against this Ohio State defense. And the thing is the secondary was where the big injury concerns were. Right, Sevian Banks dressed up last week, didn't play. The depth chart actually just came out 2 hours before Stuckey and I started recording this podcast. Like, Sevian Banks is listed as at corner as starting. Josh Proctor walked off practice yesterday being Wednesday, walked off the practice field in pads. He's in the depth chart starting. So, Cameron Brown's not there, but his backup had a pretty good day, a couple penalties, but a pretty good day, as a replacement in the secondary. And so that leads us to this. If Oregon doesn't have the offense to keep up, and Oregon doesn't have the defense that we've said all summer, they don't have the rush defense to stop Mayan Williams. If they don't have the defense to stop Travion Henderson from taking a ball in the backfield, and you guys have to guard Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, then there's 2 things that we know. We know that Ohio State's going to get theirs, and that Oregon's going to have problems scoring. And so the question is, do you take an over team total 39 on Ohio State? Because that's really what I want to do. I want to take an over 39 Ohio State, and I want to take an under 64 on Ohio State. I'm sorry, on the full game total, under 64, a team total of Ohio State over 39. There's a chance for a middle there because I don't see Oregon getting theirs. And you would say, well, why don't you just take the spread? I mean, I should, right? I mean, I power rate at 14.5, but it's just one of those things where you never know with this Ohio State defense and the kind of changes that they're making.
By backdoor probability.
Yeah,
too.
There's backdoor probability. I am more comfortable taking Oregon team. I'm sorry. I am more comfortable taking an Ohio State team total over and a full game under, especially at a 9 a.m. Pacific Coast time for Oregon here. Give me some Buckeyes all day to score a ton of points.
On the same page there. For our second marquee game, I'm not sure if we're going to agree like we did with Oregon, Ohio State. I'm talking about the Cyhawk rivalry. Iowa State, 4.5-point favorites at home against Iowa, over under 46. We've talked ad nauseum about Iowa State's slow starts. Iowa has owned this rivalry. They've won 5 straight, since 2015, I believe. And Iowa State looked awful last week. They barely escaped UNI. And Iowa continued its dominance. I mean, they won 6 straight last year in dominant fashion, and they blew out Indiana. So we're taking Iowa. So I'm taking Iowa plus the points here, right? Nope. I like Iowa State here. I don't know if you like. It seems like everyone loves Iowa. Trendy dog alert. I think they're the ULL of this week. But I went back and watched the Iowa State, Northern Iowa highlights in most of the game. And look, they basically did nothing. And they've done this before against Northern Iowa, and they've done this before under Matt Campbell in week 1. But Charlie Kohler, the number 1, their tight end, didn't play. But they didn't call. They had 1 ball they threw down the field. It was a beautiful pass that was completed. But they did nothing. They were just checking it down. Northern Iowa was selling out against the run, and Iowa State said, I don't care. We're not showing anything. We're just being ultra-conservative. I don't necessarily agree with that approach. I mean, they could have lost. And, like, you already have a veteran team. Like, everyone already has tape on you. Go out there and get into a rhythm, which they haven't done in the past. But they weren't trying to do anything. The defense was obviously excellent. They shut out another team in the second half. In 3 of their past 6 games, their opponent has not scored in the second half. They've scored a total of 16 points in those 6 games. Pretty impressive. So we know the defense is going to be excellent. But look, I just think they weren't showing anything. And if you look at Iowa last week, who we both liked against Indiana, they had 2 pick sixes. Penix was awful. And we said that Indiana is not a good matchup to take advantage of some of the weaknesses that Iowa has on its roster. Well, Iowa State is. They have a great offensive line. They have a great running back that can take advantage of what I think is a soft underbelly of that Iowa defense. I think that we're getting some value with Iowa State here because of what happened last week, because of what people, have know about Iowa State in September, know about this rivalry. Iowa State knows all that too. I actually make the spread. I mean, I'm really high on Iowa State, as a little over a touchdown. I'm waiting. I was waiting for it to get down to 3. What I might do is just throw Iowa State and Ohio State together in a money line parlay, because this points are valuable. I will say points are valuable in this game with a total of 45 and two plus defenses and a rivalry game. But I like Iowa State. I think there's value with the Cyclones, and I think that they finally get this monkey off their back and beat Iowa and get a big win in September. So having said all that, are you coming on the island, the Ames Island with me? Are you also riding with the trendy dog in Iowa?
The Ames Island, which is an interesting, there is definitely going to be a sea of alcohol at game day. So I don't know where you're going to find an island, because a lot of people are going to be swimming in that parking lot after this game.
I will be too. So we have that in common.
Yeah. Listen, I think what Stuckey just told everybody is something you should do as a handicapper. Go down narrative street and then punch holes in it. And the narrative is out there in 2 fronts. There's a buy low, sell high for what Iowa State did in the vanilla game against Northern Iowa. And then there's that final score that you see from the Hawkeyes against Indiana, which is kind of beefed up by a Riley Moss pick 6 times 2. And when you go down narrative street, you can understand why this has been all Iowa money. And, I was a little bit shocked to see that, SP Plus had this game as Iowa as a favorite. And for me, this is,
really?
I was, and that's the reason that nothing's come across the Action app. That's the reason nothing has come across from me on the Action app, is because there are sharps that believe in Iowa, and there are people that follow SP Plus religiously and would bet it no matter what it is. But let me take a trip down narrative street and tell everybody what I see, which is, the biggest issues I see for the Hawkeyes are Spencer Petrus's ability to read a 3-3-5 defense. So if you look back into the history of the games that he's played, he has faced a 3-3-5 defense just once. And that was when half the snaps against Minnesota. They ran other schemes, but half the time they were in 3-3-5, especially in long down and distances. If you look at PFF, that was Spencer Petrus's worst graded game as a passer in the entire 2020 season. He has not seen a 3-3-5 since. The 3-3-5 is designed to disguise coverage, designed to disguise blitz, which Iowa State will do. They run 3-3-5 on 92% of snaps on defense. 20% of the time they send blitz, generally when the offense is showing 11 formation, or they double their blitz rate when the offense shows 2 tight ends. So what did I just say? Iowa, when they run 12, you can expect Iowa State's coming in heavy with the blitz. When they run 11, half the time. But really the point is, Iowa's quarterback's worst graded game came against a defense last year, and he has not seen that defense set up until this game. This is a big jump for him. He's going on the road. It's his first road game, as a college athlete at quarterback, considering, limited attendance last year. And, I think a big thing that people are overlooking is that Iowa State gets Charlie Kolar back. And that's important for what Matt Campbell wants to do. And you look at that score against Northern Iowa and you say, oh my God, Campbell's fucking it up again here in September and Iowa State's going to be out of it. But the truth is that Charlie Kolar wasn't there. And that limited Matt Campbell's ability to call his favorite formations, which are 12 and 13. That means 2 tight end sets or 3 tight end sets. No one loves putting 3 tight ends on the field and mixing up their routes, their pre-snap motion, and confusing the hell out of defenses than Matt Campbell. So the question is the only question I have about Iowa State is Breece Hall, because there was talk about him being a little bit dinged up going into the Northern Iowa game. He still ran the ball, but only 1 point yards after contact. That explosiveness isn't there, and we don't know why. But if it's still not there against Iowa, they have to still attack the defensive line. If you look at this Iowa defensive line, not only are they weighing around 270, 275 these days, but the numbers that they posted against Indiana weren't that impressive. Tackles Yaha Black and Lucas Van Ness posted 2 of the worst rush defense grades on the team. Edge Zach Van Valkenburg had 1 tackle and 2 missed tackles. And Deonta Craig and the other edge posted the lowest pass rushing grades on the team. So if Breece Hall can't attack this defensive line, this small defensive line in Iowa standards, then you can expect Campbell's going to line up in 13 with his best tight end and confuse the shit out of that Iowa front seven. So take it all into account. Iowa's quarterback doesn't like the scheme. He posted his lowest marks against it last year. He hasn't practiced against it since. And then if you look at the fact that Kohler is back at tight end for Iowa State, and now Matt Campbell can go full 13 and confuse this Iowa defensive line, I'm on Iowa State. Now, there should be something said about market entry point, right? Okay, just because I like Iowa State doesn't mean I'm going to go out there and start buying 4.5, 5, 6, whatever is out there. I think market entry point is very important. This is college game day. Iowa is taking in a ton of tickets, a ton of money. I expect this number to dip down to 3.5 again. I wouldn't be surprised if it came down to 3. Last week, Stuck and I sat on this podcast and then went on our live show, Big Bets on Campus, on Saturday, and said we would love for Iowa to keep dropping from 6 all the way down to 3 against Indiana. To me, this is the same thing. I'll take Iowa State, lowest number that I can get. So market entry point here is crucial in a game like this, but I'm with Stuck. I'm all over Iowa State, and there are X's and O's on both sides that support that case.
Yeah, it's funny that last week the market was all about fading Iowa.
Yep.
And then when we liked Iowa, and now it's completely flipped, and we're against Iowa here. I finally think this is time. We're starting Brocktober early, people. We're starting it in the second week of September. Play that clip back if they lose, and I'll eat my words. And I'm sure we'll have tons of voicemails from folks in Iowa City. And we work with a lot of people that went to Iowa, so I can't wait for that game. Let's get to our last marquee game of the weekend. Look, after last week, I had Western Michigan. We didn't talk about that game. We have to give Bodog Jim a couple minutes. Credit to Bodog Jim and Michigan, but I'm not even going to credit Bodog Jim. I'm going to credit Mike McDonald and the Ravens, the new defensive coordinator from the Ravens. Oh God, RIP my Ravens. I mean, I wonder if did someone else tear their ACL did anyone else tear their ACL while I'm recording this? But Washington will take on Michigan at WinBet. Michigan is a 7-point favorite, over under 48.5. Now, what can we take from last week? Michigan beat up on another directional Michigan school, but they did look better in the defense. I like the defensive scheme that they were running. They were really disguising a lot of their looks. On offense, they kind of just went really heavy at times and just overpowered a bad Western Michigan defense. But, McNamara made some good throws. They did lose Ronnie Bell, which is big, their top receiver. This on the surface, this number is crazy. It's crazy inflated, but
yeah,
I don't know what to expect from Washington. And here's why. Jimmy Lake doesn't say anything about injuries. Last week, they had so many guys out that it was insane. Their top 3 receivers are out. And then Jalen Polk, the Texas Tech transfer, got hurt. He's out a couple months. They had a bunch of guys that never caught a pass playing receiver. They have a good tight end. That's who they basically just threw to. But at Dylan Morris, I'm not a fan of Dylan Morris. That's why I was low on Oregon and Washington compared to the rest of the conference. I didn't believe in either Brown or Morris. You might even see them go to Sam Heward. You're seeing a lot of Huskies fans call for Sam Heward, who's the son of former Washington quarterback Damon Heward and nephew of Brock Heward, who we both are starting to like as an announcer. So shout out to Brock. So you might see him in there. They've had some other injuries on the defensive side of the ball. They just looked lifeless last week against Montana and in a bad loss. So in that game, Montana beat Washington on their 13-7. It doesn't get worse than that. Dylan Morris was 27 of 46 for 226 yards with no touchdowns and 3 interceptions against an FCS team. Washington ran the ball. Another thing, their senior running back wasn't available either. Washington ran the ball to McGrew. Washington ran the ball 27 times for 65 yards, 2.4 yards per rush. Their defense held up, as you would expect against Montana and Hope. Montana only had 10 first downs. But the offense looked horrific. I don't know what to expect here, who they're going to throw the ball. They couldn't run the ball. All their receivers are hurt. Are they going to go to the freshman? When some of the reporters asked Jimmy Lake, he said, Dylan Morris is my starting quarterback. And they said, will we see Heward? He said, Dylan Morris is our starting quarterback. He doesn't say anything. So he just kept repeating himself. So I don't know. I would think that if Morris comes out and throws a pick early, you're going to have to put the kid in. So hard to project what Washington's going to look like on offense. The Michigan defense looked better. How much can you take from that against Western Michigan, who I think does have a good offense? There's going to be wind here as well. It's a Saturday night game. The Washington defense does have some injuries in the front seven, but they have two excellent corners, a couple of good linebackers. It's Jimmy Lake defense, not going to give up a lot of big plays. This feels like it's an under game to me, throw in the wind as well. Washington, I just don't know what you're going to get from the offense. I mean, and if you get Heward in there, who knows how it's going to go? Maybe he lights it up. Maybe he throws more picks. It can't get worse than what Morris looked like last week. What do you see here?
Yeah, are we throwing the towel in on the season already and saying throw Heward in there? Let's just wave the white flag. This Jimmy Lake era is not going very well at all. And, some defensive coordinators were made to stay as coordinators their entire career. So we'll see how this turns out. But listen, I favor a first half under here. Put it in on the Ashen app. Wind is a major factor in this game, and the Washington defense is proven against the pass. I mean, I know they have all the injuries, but what are we going to get out of Michigan here? They graded out 18th in defensive passing success rate and third in defensive finishing drives against Western Michigan. So both defenses are expected to perform here better than both of the offenses. There is no Ronnie Bell in this game. That also supports an under. And they posted a very poor rank in their game in finishing drives against Western Michigan, both on the offensive and defensive side. So we'll see if they can get that turned around. But the tempo is a concern if you're going to go on the over with Michigan at any point. Michigan finished last week 90th in plays per minute, which tells me this whole Josh Gaddis calling plays, I think that's over. I'm not saying over as in the total. I think Josh Gaddis's time as being the play caller and the designer of the offense, that might be done. And then as far as Washington goes, the John Donovan play calling, we kind of said it was elementary in our summer podcast preview. This is too predictable about what you do in standard downs and what you're doing in passing downs. And now we know that there's just no explosiveness on this team. They finished 120th in big play percentage. Big plays being runs over 12 yards, passes over 15 yards. And they finished 89th in finishing drives and 55th in plays per minute. So there's no tempo, there's no explosiveness, and there's no execution when they get in the red zone. So, and that goes for both these teams. So the number mathematically has moved well beyond, for a spread perspective, beyond projections. But some teams, sometimes teams are just bad. And Washington, I think, is that team. It's a one-game sample set against Montana, but when you come out 119th in special teams SP plus, and you have a lot of other things that are hovering around the top 100 mark. And I know it's a one-game sample, but against an FCS team, you should not be posting numbers like this. This is a first half underplay for me. I'm not sure how Washington contributes to the final score. So yeah, that's it for me. This game is gross.
Yeah, I think the under's a look too. I mean, I can't see Michigan doing too much in the passing game without Bell against two really good corners, probably a top 10 corner duo in college football. The only way I see this going over is like if Washington's offense magically transforms. And the only way I think that would happen is if Heward plays and he's great off the bat in the first action on the road in the big house on a Saturday night and all the receivers come back. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But Lake's not saying much. They're all day to day. So I agree. It might seem obvious, but I think the look here is the under. This feels like a 20-17 type of game. All right, let's move on to the best of the rest in our rundown. We have 3 games to get to. I did want to go through 2 games that involve service academies, one where they're playing each other on what will be the 20th anniversary of 9/11, which will be a talking point on Saturday. Thoughts are with anyone that was personally impacted or lost anyone on that day 20 years ago. Let's start with an Army team that took all of my money last week. against Georgia State, playing Western Kentucky. And Western Kentucky, Zappy Hour is here. He threw for 7 touchdowns against an FCS school, but it was a coming out party for this Western Kentucky offense that is basically Houston Baptist offense. We've talked about this a lot. Complete 180. Now, when I look at this game, the couple interesting, I have WinBet. Army's a 7-point favorite, over under 52. Now, when I look at that Western Kentucky box score from last weekend, obviously the offense looked great. You have to tell yourself it was an FCS school in UT Martin, but, I've seen worse performances against FCS schools. The one troubling stat when I look at the box score is that UT Martin, ran it 34 times for 201 yards, averaged close to 6 yards per carry. Yep. Now you're about to play Army. So, I think that the line is about right. But the total has been I've been going back and forth in the total, and I'll tell you why. I think Army should be able to have success running the ball against Western Kentucky. Army was using tempo a lot more, which they never do early against Georgia State. They were rushing to the ball and then snapping the ball early before the game got out of hand. So I'm thinking Army might be using more tempo this year. It didn't show in the final stats because the game got blown out of proportions and they went back to old Army. Tyler, one of their 2 quarterbacks, they have co-starters, is also questionable. He's like the speedy guy, the change of pace, the better runner. Whereas Anderson is the better thrower, can run also and run the triple option, but that's something to keep an eye on. But, Western Kentucky obviously has this spread out offense. Army is a pretty good secondary for Army, but they should have some success throwing the ball in Army. But, playing an Army over is always dangerous because Army could have a 10-minute drive and, there's just so little possessions and there's so little room for error when you're going like over 52 in an Army game. And here, if, you look back, these two teams played each other in 2019 and Western Kentucky won 17-8 at home, held Army to 208 yards of offense. That was a really good Western Kentucky defense. Here's what Tyson Helton, the Western Kentucky head coach, said. He said, you have to Army them back like we did. You have to play ball, control the offense. You have to be able to run the football and eat up the clock. Maybe a boring football game, but that's the formula. Don't have penalties, don't have turnovers, have to be able to run the football and hold the football. Helton said, this is from the Western Kentucky Herald, Helton said he wants to establish the run and play at a slower pace this week. Western Kentucky had just 2 drives eclipsed the 3-minute mark against the Skyhawks. Meanwhile, Army dictated the pace of its game, holding the ball for 42 minutes. So I don't know. So Western Kentucky is going to go back to its old offense, and they're just going to run the ball and go slow. So I keep going back and forth because I'm like, Western Kentucky, this new offense, Houston Baptist spread out offense, they're going to score points. Army's going to be able to run the ball. But now Western Kentucky not going to be Houston Baptist for this game and try to out Army? Any thoughts here?
Yeah, good luck with that. I put a play in on the app on the openers. This one came out 3.5 now. I think at 6 at WinBet. And this is a number where you kind of take your projections and throw them out because the handicap on Army is what can you do in the trench? And you're right. The Tennessee Martin rushing numbers against Western Kentucky scare the hell out of me for, both you and I love Western Kentucky so much and Bailey Zappi, and we think that they can win the conference. And Tyson Helton, I think, made a statement that the team's going to go 12-0 this year, but this is a challenge. Out of the rushing attempts, 33 rushing attempts that Tennessee Martin had, 5 were stuffed. 5. That's a 15% stuff rate. That is way less than national average. Tennessee Martin was able to run at will against this Western Kentucky defense. So that is certainly a point of interest because, like Stuck says, if Army wants to, if they have a 3-point lead or a 4-point lead, they will go as slow as possible and they will stay on schedule. Now, remember, with Army, that means you go on every 4th and 1. You go on every 4th and 2. It doesn't matter where you're at. So, Western Kentucky's defense is not currently set up to stop the run. Now, if they want to try to play Army ball with an offense that comes in from Houston Baptist that is used to throwing for 600 yards a game, and they had possessions in the first quarter against Tennessee Martin, I don't think they lasted longer than 40 seconds. I've never seen a team move so fast. I mean, it slowed down in the second half, but that first half tempo was lightning quick. And, it really showed in the results too. I mean, Western Kentucky was fantastic in finishing drives. I think they averaged 5.5 points every time they crossed the 40-yard line. They only ran 16.
There's teams that play really bad FCS teams every week. Zappy, his efficiency rating, the highest of any FBS quarterback in any game since 2016. Baker Mayfield did it in the game against I think Texas Tech, probably Cliff Kingsbury there, Cliff Kingsbury defense. But so yeah, he was obviously dominant. But go ahead.
Yeah, my issue is that Western Kentucky played 45 downs in standard downs, and it's only 16 downs in passing downs. They were on schedule the entire night, so I'm not sure they know what it is to be 3rd and 8. They averaged 18.3 yards in passing downs, and I'm not. Look what Army's secondary did. They shut Georgia State down. They forced turnovers and immediately had field position, at the 20-yard line. It was a typical Army performance that, just drains the life out of you if you have a ticket on the other side. I go back to what the handicap on Army is. 100, usually very slow. They'll choke you out with a 3-point lead. And if you can't defend the run, they're just going to pound the A gap all day. Western Kentucky can't defend the run. So while Tyson Helton has a brand new offensive coordinator and a brand new quarterback and a whole new scheme on the offensive side of the ball, to change everything up and say you want to out Army at Army, I'm not a believer. Now, the number is worth talking about because, again, we're at entry point. We're at open, where it closes. I suspect this number will close around 6.5. And if Tyson Helton and Western Kentucky are successful at all at keeping this game close and out Armying Army, you're going to want to get that Western Kentucky 6.5 or 7 if it goes to overtime. I can say that if it gets over 7 live, I probably will play back on the 3.5. If you're one of the ones on the Action app that took one of these openers with Army, there's going to be a window here to play back. But right now, I'm comfortably sticking with Army. If you can't defend the run, especially against an FCS team, then I don't see why I would back you with my money.
All right, let's move on to the other game involving 2 service academies. That's Navy hosting Air Force. Air Force won in a laugher against Lafayette. I'm not sure how much we can take from that in week 1. While Navy got blown out by Marshall. Navy's having all kinds of problems on offense, really, since losing Malcolm Perry. They did have put together a lot of drives. I think they had almost 400 yards of offense against Marshall. They just couldn't finish drives and everything. It was trying to use different quarterbacks. I think they used 4 quarterbacks in the game. They really just can't settle on a QB, but they were able to move the ball a little bit. The biggest question here, and they're going to be pissed. Navy at home, full stadium, anniversary of 9/11. There's going to be just a lot of energy in that crowd. And they got embarrassed by Air Force in week 1 last year. They lost 40-7. So, and then they got embarrassed last week. Ken is going to have his boys ready to roll. The question is, what do we know about Air Force? And we know that their defense got a lot of turnbacks who didn't play last year back. And their defense should be pretty good. But we don't know much about their offense, especially the offensive line, which lost all 5 starters, including 2 pro prospects. How much can you take when they play Lafayette? Both these teams are very familiar with each other. Usually when 2 service academy, triple option service guys play, you let them look at the under. I wasn't around when the openers came out. It opened at 45. Obviously just bet that. It's going to come down to 40 every time. Total's down to 41 now at WinBet. This line has come down a little bit to Navy plus 5.5. I'm really tempted to play Navy. I think there's value in the number. The situation favors Navy here. And both teams are familiar with the option. It's going to be a game where it comes down to just one long possession, and who converts a 4th and 1, or who gets forces a fumble on a pitch. I think it's going to be a game like that, low scoring. So points, catching 5.5 with a total of 40-41, even more valuable. I'll be looking for the 6. It's more of a gut feel because the Navy offense is scary. Last year was their worst. They couldn't run the ball. the Navy team that couldn't run the ball. Some of their worst numbers ever. But I have a gut feeling Navy shows up for this one. Their defense should be pretty good. Same with Air Forces. You have questions about both offenses. I might take the points with the home pup of a matchup of two triple option teams. And these games that we've seen many times with Army Navy can be wars, even if one team ends up being significantly better than the other. What are your thoughts here?
Navy comes out against BYU in the opener in the pandemic 2020 season. They get blown out 55-3. Turns out they were tackling tires, pillow cushions, not sure what the hell they were doing in preseason camp. What happened after they lost 55-3? If anybody remembers, they went to New Orleans to play Tulane, and they were 6.5
dominated in the second half. They slept in the first half. As 6.5 point underdogs, came back and won that game outright as a 6.5 point dog on the road after losing 55-3. So the numbers that are sitting in front of me right now, the Navy put up last week against Marshall. And I hate people that are like this, like people that don't actually watch the games, but there's this narrative out there that Marshall's not as good as that. And Navy's just wasn't prepared. No, Marshall is that good. And Navy had a bad day. All right. I mean, dead last in coverage rankings, 127th in defensive havoc. It's red. Everything's red. All the stats are bad. Doesn't matter which side you look. But believe it or not, Navy placed 25th in offensive line yards. They actually did get a little bit of movement in the trench. Now, they didn't sustain drives and they didn't, do much from that angle, but they did get movement there with the trench and get the ball and keep the ball on schedule and first and second down. And you won't have to worry about coverage against Air Force.
You don't have to. Yeah. I mean, you throw out the coverage stuff. You really look at the fact that like Navy ran the ball 82%. Air Force last week against Lafayette ran 93%. So you can see why the total is like falling. Like it wouldn't be a shock to see this be 10-7, 13-7, something like that. And, in that same breath, you hear Stuck say, I'm tempted to take Navy in the points. Well, with the way this total is falling, that side gets more and more valuable the more that this falls. So I'm with you in the fact that, yes, Navy can bounce back. And I do see that their line yards put them, I know it's a one-game sample, guys. Well, in a month, these numbers will mean something. But when Navy gets blown out by Marshall, but they're still able to post 25th in line yards offensively, that means they might be able to move the ball here. Air Force is by no means, has the ability to completely shut teams down like Army does. I think the Air Force is still feeling itself out after a lot of, change and turnover with how the Air Force Academy let people go, come back, spending their year of eligibility. They don't really have a thing called super senior. So, I like Navy also. I'm interested to see where the line ultimately ends up. We make it at Action Network.
I don't think you'll see a 7.
I don't think so either. Yeah. I mean, I make it -4. SP Plus has this at -5.5. I think as we
like 3.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as we record and it sits at 6 at WinBet, I would not be surprised at all if this thing closes 5, maybe sub
4.
5. Yeah.
4.
So
that's my guess.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to our last of the rundown games, and that's the Holy War. Utah going for its 10th straight victory in the Holy War. Although these games are, go look at the history of these games. They always are close. I mean, here are some of Utah's wins in that 9-game win streak: 17-16, 24-21, 20-13, 35-28, 20-19, 19-13, 35-27. The last time they played, they didn't play last year, was in 2019. Utah did blow them out 30-12. That's at WinBet. Utah's a 7-point favorite. This game is, I think it's at 9:30 or 10:30 Eastern. I really want to take Utah here. I think that BYU, from what I've seen, watching some of that Arizona game, looking at some of the advanced stats, knowing some of the injuries, their top receiver Romney's going to be out. They do get the Nakua brothers, a transfer from Utah and Washington, should be able to go at receiver. 2 talented wide receiver transfers. Their linebacker should be back. Their corner, I think, probably still out after going unconscious on Saturday. Kicker is iffy. They have a really good kicker too. But BYU, look at the box score against Arizona. They lost the box score in that game.
Uh-huh.
Arizona was the better team statistically, and you could say BYU wasn't showing much, but they were getting pressured the entire game. And against Arizona, I think that this sets up, outside of we've lost 9 roads at home. It should be an electric atmosphere. Utah's bigger, stronger, faster, more talented. At BYU, I'm sure is going to drop 8 a lot on defense, and I think Utah can just maul them up front and run down. The Brewer can use his legs. They can hand it off, and they can control the line of scrimmage. On the other side, they should be able to get pressure. They have some of the best linebackers and defensive linemen in all of college football. I think it could be a long day for Jaren Hall. I'm leaning Utah laying the 7. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to lay it, that's the side I would lay. This is a game that I power rate at 11, so Utah would definitely be the side, but I'm probably going to veer off and take an over in this game. Utah has the ability to have an explosive offense and big play percentage. Like I said, big play is rushes over 12 yards, passes over 15 yards, almost everything Utah did. And I understand the competition from week 1, but they have the ability to be one of the most explosive offenses west of the Mississippi River. And that is something that BYU is going to have to deal with from a defensive perspective. But both of these teams were excellent in finishing drives. Once the offenses crossed the 40-yard line in week 1, they were able to get points up on the board. Stuck makes a good point about Arizona. I mean, that was really good on Arizona. I think Arizona is a play on team, but and a good call by our own Brett McMurphy. I think he was calling Arizona well before we even got around to week 1. But I think what's interesting is BYU wasn't ready for that because the tempo was insane. Keep that in the back of your hat that Arizona's tempo was like 21 seconds per play. That shocked me a little bit, which is why I'm on an over with San Diego State as I watch it continue to fall off the opener 48. No, I can't believe I did it again. Oh man. So anyways, I did it again. I like the over in this game. I
might come in and bet the San Diego State over if it hits 44.5 because I know that it'll end 45.
God, I'll have to hit it again. Listen. Utah has the ability to have explosive plays. BYU's defense not expected to be able to contain that. That's why I do favor Utah on the side. Power rated at 11. It's a total that I make at 54. The number does look like it's going. I probably should hit it here as we're talking because 49 has turned into 49.5 in a few places. These teams are executing past the 40-yard line, and I think that bodes well for more points than usual in this kind of series.
All right, let's move on to some FCS or no. There's quite a few FCS matchups this weekend. Let's hit on 1 or 2 of them. I'll start. I'll mention 2 games. Last week, it's Tin Horn weekend for Alabama. Clip. Mercer will take on Alabama. I think Alabama's out there 54.5, 55, you'll see. 55-point favorite
with a total of 60.
Yeah, but
truly,
Alabama didn't win 69-0 last week. Alabama didn't run for 600 yards last week. Guess who did? Mercer. Mercer ran all over Point University 69-0. Point's a miserable program. They've won 12 total games since 2015. Mercer runs like a funky offense. They have it's like a spread wing, and they have a scat back, and they have motion all over the place, and then they try to with sweeps and jet sweeps, and they try to trick you and go over top. I think they might be able to put a drive or 2 together and get to 13 or 14 late in the second half when the starters. I mean, Bama has Florida on deck. So is the win total 6? Is the team total going to be 6? Right? I mean, you can get $300 down on these, but I'm gonna bet the Mercer team total over. Let's go more Alabama pain. The other game, it's only for a couple $100. It's for shits. I mean, a couple $100 could be a lot for anyone that don't. It's all relative. So if you join me, do it small compared to how you normally bet. The other game that I'm thinking about betting is Indiana, which is a 32.5-point favorite. They are playing Idaho. Do you know what Idaho football did last week? I didn't even know they played until I was looking at this game. They won 68-0. Do you know who they beat? If you would have no idea. They beat Simon Fraser 68-0. Simon Fraser is a Canadian football team that was practicing and plays Canadian football rules and has never played college football rules. That's who played Iowa last week.
Oh my God.
And Idaho won.
Was there a rogue? Was there a rogue involved?
I didn't know if I don't know if there was a line out or anything. I didn't see the score anywhere until I looked it up. But yeah, the Vandals, who used to be FBS team.
Petrino's still there, right?
So yeah, Petrino is still there. He has a quarterback competition. I was reading all about the Vandals. Yeah, they have a quarterback competition. One of these guys, Michael Beaudry, UConn, 2019. He was the quarterback. That's who Idaho's rolling with. But this is a take out your frustration Indiana game. This is kind of like Nebraska. After Nebraska lost to Illinois, I would lay it. Idaho is miserable. Don't be fooled by the Simon Fraser score. Anything you want to mention in FCS?
Yeah, real quick. I think I'm going to be on Georgia Tech. Insert laughing here. Listen, embarrassing loss for Georgia Tech against Northern Illinois. Things are going downhill for the Jeff Collins era. We just said it the other day when we did the recap. And now they're running into a Kennesaw State team that if a lot of people look at the surface on this and say, oh my God, it's a Kennesaw State team that runs the triple option by Brian Bohannon, the coach that used to be tied to Paul Johnson's staff at Georgia Southern, Navy, and you guessed it, he coached at Georgia Tech. And I bet Bohannon for Kennesaw State really wants to get some revenge here. And this should be a great spot for the Owls to go in and shake things up in Midtown Atlanta and head on down to Dan Tannis at the Bloody Mary Bar. And no. So, I mean, there are things happening with Kennesaw right now that are really not good. Practice-wise, things are going bad. Last week they played an NAIA school, Reinhardt. They struggled. NAIA Reinhardt has 24 scholarships, and they came within 10 points of beating Kennesaw State. Kept up with them the whole game. Bohannon mentioned that they have a ton of struggles on offense. This is like the practice report from like today. Ton of struggles on offense. We're still missing assignments. We have 20 players that didn't play against Reinhardt last week, and they're not going to play against Georgia Tech. Listen, this is not the Kennesaw State that we are used to, competing in the FCS playoffs, running the triple and confusing the shit out of people. This is a team that struggled with NAIA. I can't even believe we're allowed, teams in FCS are allowed to play teams at that level. So I think the number is floating around 17.5. It's already been moved on down. I don't think people are really looking between the lines on Kennesaw State here. This may be the stock dip on Georgia Tech where you can buy. And Jeff Sims is going to play. He is healthy enough to play in this game. I'm not going to sit here and try to tell everybody that it's pretty and that we should enjoy this, but there is a dip in the stock that is the Yellow Jackets, and Kennesaw State is struggling to beat NAIA schools. So Georgia Tech, we'll see where the number lands.
Is this in a weird way? Jeff Collins going for revenge against the Owls. No more owl gifts, only owls fading. But yeah, I don't disagree from what you read, and I saw that score with Kennesaw State. I didn't realize exactly
do you know
what was going on.
Do you know who's running scout team quarterback for Georgia Tech this week? Their defensive coordinator. So their defensive coordinator, Andrew Thacker, he was actually on Bohannon's staff in 2016. And so Thacker told the media in Atlanta this week, he said, I know exactly how Bohannon is going to coach his quarterback and how he's going to coach that offense with the triple option. So yes, he's not taking any hits, but the defensive coordinator is running scout team quarterback this week for Georgia Tech. They're pretty serious about getting this win here.
By the way, I keep in the back of my head all week. I'm like, oh my God, I keep getting shocked. Oh my God, I bet USF. I had thought about it again, about South Florida against Florida. I am not looking forward to watching that game, but if you're sweating with me, I'll be tweeting, trying to tweet through it. All right, before we get out of here, let's go 3 and out. All right, first down. It's not a great week for weekday. There's nothing on Wednesday. There's nothing on Thursday. We do have some Friday night lights. Give the people one bet and a 1-minute explanation why.
We're going to take UTEP Miners. Go Miner Nation. Going up to Boise State. We're going to put the theory to test that I think that they can be an explosive offense, especially in passing downs. I think they can get it down the field. Boise State in the box score against UCF was absolute garbage. 0.77 yards per play in running plays, 28% success rate in passing downs. I know it's UCF and this is a drop in competition and they're at home on the blue turf, but I've been saying for weeks that UTEP can pass the ball down the field. The number should be 21, not 26.
Fair enough. second down, let's go to our money line underdog parlay. Favorite money line underdog this week. I'll start. I'm going Troy. I took them. I bet them early in the week, but then the app at plus 5.5. I make this line 1. I think that, when I look at Liberty, they had a great year last year, but I was high on this Troy team coming into last year. They lost 4 games by 1 possession. They were right there in a bunch of games. They bring back, a lot of returning experience on both sides of the ball. They did lose a couple receivers, but they upgraded a quarterback. They brought in, last year you had Free and Gunnar Watson on and off. They were dealing with COVID last year too, quarterback injuries, but they brought in a Missouri transfer who is much more accurate, just a big upgrade as far as passing ability. And I think that the upside of this offense is great. The offensive line should be much better. They have 2 all Sun Belt performers. They bring back all 5 starters. The defense returns a ton of experience, brings in a couple transfers that should contribute. And when I look at this Liberty team, what they do well on defense, they get after the quarterback and they can cover some. But I think this Troy team, they can protect. They are great at protecting the quarterback, their offensive line, efficient, quick passing attack can negate some of that. And you can run on this Liberty team. I think this Troy team, which wasn't good at running the ball last year, will be able to run the ball against Liberty. And when I look at this Liberty defense, look, they only allowed 20 points per game last year, a drop of 8 points from 2019, despite losing 7 starters. Dig into their numbers, though. I know they played 3 Power 5 teams. They held NC State to 15 points, but, NC State had their backup quarterback. Look at the other teams they played. Va Tech put up 35 on them. Coastal Carolina put up 38 on them. They have such misleading numbers. Here are the FBS teams they played. Think about these FBS offenses last year. Western Kentucky. They went out and adopted Houston Baptist's offense. That's how bad it was. Florida International. UL Monroe. Never led for a second. Southern Miss. Had 7 coaches last year. And UMass. Those were the FBS schools they played. So that's 5 of their 10 regular season games. Oh, and they also played North Alabama and Western Carolina. So there's 70% of their games. And then one of the Power 5 teams they played was Syracuse, who had an embarrassing offense. So I don't think this defense is as good as their numbers indicate. I think they're being inflated in the market. I'm also pretty high on Troy coming into the year. It was a buy-on team for me. I like Troy. I think they win this game outright. Give me the men of Troy and the Trojans. How about you? Moneyline underdog?
Yeah, I like Troy too. I took them season win total over, so this is definitely one that we need to get. It is just not a lot of underdogs on this card, and there's a lot of small ones. Considering we didn't get the moneyline parlay home last week with Fresno. They came close to cashing a big one. Felt like I might need to go a little bit smaller here. I don't think we have a clear power rating on South Carolina. We have Zeb Nolan coming in, throwing 4 touchdowns against Eastern Illinois, and we're rushing to beat a point spread of 43.5 by getting 46 on the board. Did not allow a single point. I think the South Carolina defense legitimately put up good numbers in the box score. East Carolina has a shot here to win at home, +2. Take it on the money line. Holton Ahlers is the November Holton Ahlers that we love to bet on, is going to show up here against a South Carolina team that created 0 havoc against Eastern Illinois. No tackles for loss. They didn't have any sacks. They didn't do anything to affect the play of Eastern Illinois. So that's going to be a problem against an Eastern Carolina team that generally folds against teams that can cause havoc. If you can't bring that, then the Pirates have a shot to beat you outright, and I'll take them at home in Greenville as a 2-point dog. Don't want the points. Let's do it on money line.
And maybe South Carolina gets caught looking ahead a little bit to Georgia next week.
Yep.
As well. All right. And before we get to third down, favorite overdog. For those not familiar with the inside joke on the podcast, that's our favorite. I threw out Indiana. That's for peanuts. I'm going to go Iowa State. We already talked about it. Clones.
Yeah.
You in agreement?
Yeah, 100%. Iowa State's probably going to be the anchor that we talk about in our Moneyline Round Robin when we do our Saturday morning program. There's so many bad games on. There's some games on the slate like Temple and Akron where I really wanted to kind of get into that.
You're not taking Akron.
No.
Iowa State it is. Clean sweep. I'm not. You're staring at that. I'm not even letting you put it out into.
Well,
I'm not put it out of the universe. Don't say it. You're not laying 7 with Temple. Not letting you.
No, I'm not going to lay 7 with Temple, but I will say that keep your eyes on Georgia. I know what the spot is. I know that they just played the game of their life, and but at the same time, they didn't score any offensive touchdowns. This number should be above 24. The opener of 28 I thought was pretty bad. I played it on the Action app. So my favorite overdog is, even if JT Daniels isn't there, Stetson Bennett has plenty of experience. And we haven't identified, who the 4 to 6 players are that have COVID, but assuming the offensive line is there, assuming those running backs are there, UAB is a team that has folded against Power 5 teams against the spread. Tennessee and Texas A&M come to mind. There's a couple others, like, without looking at the schedule from previous years, Bill Clark does not cover big spreads against Power 5 schools. He dominates G5 schools against the spread, but this isn't that spot. And I think you're going to get value. The more this bad news comes out about if JT Daniels doesn't play, that's going to affect the spread. But they have an experienced quarterback. I think my favorite overdog is going to be Georgia. The spot, after the game against Clemson, remember, they didn't score an offensive touchdown. They got to get off the schneid here and get some points on the board, and they can definitely do that with their backfield, and they don't even need to throw it deep to do that against UAB. So give me Georgia as my favorite overdog.
That under is calling my name. I know it's probably a square look, but those UAB doesn't cover against these Power 5 schools, and the games always go over. It's like they're like 34 to 7. All right, before we get out of here, third down. Our favorite bet of the weekend. All right, for my favorite bet of the weekend, I'm going with the Tulsa Golden Hurricane right in your backyard, +7 first half against Oklahoma State. I expect them to come out with their hair on fire. They lost to this Oklahoma State team last year, 16-7. They actually were leading 7-3 in the fourth quarter of that game. Tulsa's cut, so they're out for some revenge here against Big Brother. They in their state. They're coming off a loss against an FCS team last week. Now, they had a bunch of guys suspended who are all going to be back this week. I expect them to come out with their hair on fire. Meanwhile, Oklahoma State, just a disastrous game last week against Missouri State. Now, Spencer Sanders didn't play. I expect him to play, but he might not. If he doesn't, great. The offensive line, which lost Tevin Jenkins to the NFL, was horrendous. They couldn't get anything going on the ground against Missouri State, who almost beat them. So I have major questions about this Oklahoma State offense. And on the other side of the ball, look, they lost their star defensive end forward for the year. Trey Sterling, one of the best safeties in the country, won't play in the first half. Another reason for betting the first half here because of a targeting call. So I think Tulsa really comes out here and battles. I think the line is a little too high. The uncertainty of Spencer Sanders, who hasn't been practicing on the COVID list, only adds to my confidence here. But I think you get a max effort from Tulsa. I love the spot. I love the situation. I have lots of questions about this Oklahoma State offensive line in particular. I think Tulsa can have a lot of success there. They get all their suspended guys back. I think this line is a little inflated. I'll take the first half thinking that Tulsa really comes out with their hair on fire here after what happened last week. Doesn't hurt that Oklahoma State won't have one of its best defenders in the first half as well. So give me Tulsa +7 first half. What do you got? Favorite bet?
Yeah, favorite bet. Let's stick with the biggest game of the day. It's going to be Oregon, Ohio State. We're going to take under 64. Wakey, eggs and bakey for Oregon playing at a 9 a.m. Pacific Coast time. They do not have the explosiveness to hang with this Ohio State team whatsoever. Yes, they have Kayvon Thibodeau. We don't know how healthy he is. But even if he can get to CJ Stroud within 2 seconds, there are weapons in the backfield with Williams and Henderson that can catch balls out on the flats and make 70-yard explosive runs for touchdowns. Ohio State has the ability to push the ball on the ground against this Oregon defense, who is not a good rush defense whatsoever. They specialize in passing downs and getting pressure from the edge, but that's not going to work if you're constantly in standard downs, which if Ohio State wants to dictate pace and sit on the ball with a 21-point lead, they can do that. And the under in this game, I am fully confident that Ohio State is going to be able to get their share of the 39 team total points that are listed on the board right now. I am not confident in Anthony Brown being able to run the ball, scramble around with all of these players on defense. This is just a game where he does not have the weapons on the outside or in the backfield to create separation for the passing game. And he's just not going to do enough from an explosive play percentage to get the Ducks on the board. So I do like Ohio State to win this game. I expect them to cover. There will be a backdoor opportunity, but it should be low scoring because once Ryan Day has a 21 to 28 point lead, this is not an Oregon defense that is built to stop the rush. And, the Ohio State can essentially sit on the ball. So give me the under 64 in Columbus in a game where I expect Ohio State to absolutely come out, explosive plays, get everybody's attention, and then just shut down this Oregon offense, which is not built to go 4 verticals and attack this Ohio State defense, which is the only way to beat the Buckeyes.
I like it. Make sure that you check out all of our stuff on actionnetwork.com and the Action Network app. Also, our live show, we gave out nothing but winners last week. Hopefully we can do it again this week, except me trying to give out Miami, which I'll be wearing Alabama gear for any of you Alabama fans.
We were forced into that. We had to give a poll. It's the poll we have to. I didn't play. I mean, I said math guy. You gave me. I didn't.
Miami.
I didn't want any part of it.
I'll eat my crow on Saturday morning on the Big Bets on Campus live show at 10 a.m. Check us out, Brett McMurphy and Steph Odie. Thanks as always to Colin. Thank you for listening. Subscribe, unsubscribe. Leave a review. Tell a friend. Tell an enemy. Big Bets on Campus podcast. Wherever you listen to your podcast. We'll do our recap show that'll be out on Monday morning. It was out Tuesday this week. They'll always be out Mondays moving forward. We'll recap the weekend. We'll talk about any weekday college football. We'll play your voicemails. Don't forget about the voicemails. 959 bad beats. I'll tweet it out all weekend. Make sure you call. But we'll be back on Monday. We'll also do some giveaways, so make sure you leave some reviews on the app. We got some good ones over the past week, so appreciate that. Thank you for listening. Let's have a big weekend and keep it rolling. We'll catch y'all later. Cheers.